Alright, today we're going to talk about Pascal's triangle, which is pretty useful, and you should have just finished an activity in which you explored Pascal's triangle. So now I'm going to explain it a little better. So hopefully you figured out what the pattern looks like. You start with a 1 up here, and all the outside of the triangle is 1. And the top is row 0. And then when you fill in the rows, you have 1, 1, 1. And then you put a 2 here because 1 plus 1 is 2. And then here, 1 plus 2 is 3, and 1 plus 2 is 3, etc. 3 plus 3 is 6, 3 plus 1 is 4. So that's where each of these come from on each row. So each row you add the ones above it to make the one that's right below it. And again, the outsides are all 1s, and you start out with row 0, row 1, etc. So kind of get in your mind what this looks like, and you probably have it on your paper anyway. And you can use this paper to do homework, so that should be helpful to you. Alright, so let's see how this is actually used. So we're going to start off with a really easy and basic example. So again, you did these on the classwork, so I'm going to kind of explain how you would use Pascal's triangle. So first of all, if you see it's x plus 1 squared, we know that expanded, this looks like x plus 1 times x plus 1, which is a really, really easy problem to FOIL. So you could just do this by foiling it, but I'm going to use it to explain so you can see how it works with Pascal's triangle. Okay, so since it's squared, you use the coefficients from row 2. So actually those numbers that you saw down here, if you remember these, you actually look at row 2, so it's 1, 2, 1, and those then become the coefficients. So I'm going to go ahead and write the coefficients. And then what I do is I take this first term, which is x, and since it's squared, I write x squared, and then I go 1 power down here, so this is x to the first, and then this would be x to the 0, in other words, there is not an x there. Then I take this number, and it would be 1 squared, 1, and then 1 to the 0. But since it's 1, everything 1 raised to every power is still 1, so I don't actually need that. So since it's a plus, I just put my plus signs in, and then I would have x squared plus 2x plus 1. And we know we don't really need that 1, but we just put it there just so we know it's there. Alright, so let's try it with x plus 1 raised to the 3rd power. Okay, so we know what this means is x plus 1 times x plus 1 times x plus 1. So we could just multiply these together and then multiply that trinomial times the binomial, and that's fine. This is just a shortcut to make it a little easier instead of having to do all that multiplication. So I look at row 3 and I take the coefficients, which if you look on your paper, it's 1, 3, 3, 1. Then I take this x, and since it's x to the 3rd, I start with x to the 3rd, x squared, x to the 1st, and this would be x to the 0, which in other words, I wouldn't have anything. And since I just have 1 here, I don't need to worry about the 1s. So then I just put my plus signs in here. And rather than doing all that multiplication, you easily have an answer. X to the 3rd plus 3x squared plus 3x plus 1. And if you multiplied it out the long way, which you did on the classwork, you will find out that it's exactly the same. Alright, so now that we've gotten the basics down, let's try this with some more challenging exercises. Alright, so here we go. The only thing that makes this a little more difficult, 2 things actually, because it's a minus sign instead of a plus sign, so we're going to have to deal with that sign. And also, instead of a 1, there's a 3. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do here, let me set my markers over here. The first thing that we're going to do here is take the y. Okay, so we know we start with the 4th, so it goes y to the 4th, y to the 3rd, y squared, y. Alright, now, I'm going to have to take the negative 3, so it's important that you remember that it's actually, we have to take the negative. So I take negative 3, and I'm going to start with the 4th power. So I'm going to put it down here. I'm going to put negative 3 to the 4th power, negative 3 to the 3rd power, negative 3 squared, negative 3 to the 1st, and then here would be negative 3 to the 0 power, but in other words, that just turns to 1. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is simplify. So negative 3 to the 1st power is just negative 3. So I'm going to have 4 times negative 3 and y cubed. Okay, so I'm going to put my 6 down here, and I have negative 3 squared, so that's actually 9. and then y squared. And then here, negative 3 to the third is negative 27. So I'm going to have 4 times negative 27 y. And then here, negative 3 to the fourth is actually 81. So I'm going to have minus 81. Okay, and then right here I can just bring down this y to the fourth, and I know that I don't really need that coefficient. Alright, so now at the very end I'm going to go ahead and completely simplify this. So this becomes y to the fourth. 4 times negative 3, that's going to be a negative 12. So I'm going to do negative 12 y cubed. 6 times 9 is 54, right? So I'm going to do plus 54 y squared. And then negative 27 times 4, that's going to be negative 108. So I do negative 108y. And then I have this, actually, negative 3 to the fourth, that will be a plus. So I have plus 81. And you should see these come out every other one. So you have positive, negative, positive, negative, positive when you have a negative sign here. Because anytime you raise that negative 3 to a odd power, like to the first, you get a negative number. And when you raise it to an even power, like we raised it to the second power here, it becomes positive. So there would be my final answer for that. Alright, so let's look at another example. That was example C. So we're going to get a little more complicated here. Okay, so now we have a coefficient with the x, and we have a number here. Okay, so let's start by putting in this. So I'm going to take this to the third, okay? So I'm going to write 4x to the third. I'm going to write 4x squared, 4x to the first, and this would be to the 0, and so I don't really need to write that. Okay, now in blue, I'm going to go ahead and do the 5. Okay, so this is going to be here, 5 to the third, and I'm going backwards here, 5 squared, 5 to the first, and then nothing. Okay, so now I'm going to need to simplify this. So I have 1, and then I have 4 times 4 times 4, so that's going to be 64x to the third. Okay, now I can see that everything's pluses, so my signs are all going to be pluses because I don't have any minuses there. So I have plus. Now, I'm going to do 3 right here times this 5, and then this is going to be actually 4 squared, so that's going to be 16x squared. Okay, and the next step I will simplify that. So you can see I did the 3, I did the 5, and then 4x squared is 16x squared. Alright, so maybe I can do this so you know that that is the blue part. Okay, now, here I have plus 3. Now I have 5 squared, so times 25. And then I have just 4x because it's to the first power. And then a plus sign, and I have 1 and 5 to the third. So 5 to the third is 125. Okay, so again, the 25 came from here. And then you know that these are the coefficients. Okay, the 1, 3, 3, and 1. So now I'm going to go back and multiply these. So 1 times 64x to the third, I just have 64x to the third. Okay, so now I need to do 16 times 5 times 3, or 3 times 5 times 16, however you think it's easiest to look at it. So 16 times 5 is 80, times 3 is 240, so plus 240x squared. Okay, so then I have, it's easier for me to do 25 times 4, because that's 100, times 3, so 300x, plus 125. Okay, so for some of you who might be kind of confused, let me just go back from the beginning here. So you write the coefficients, it's row 3, so it's 1, 3, 3, 1. You take the first term and you do 4x to the third, 4x squared, 4x to the first. Then you take the second term, which is 5. Okay, so you go 5 to the third, 5 squared, 5 to the first. Then you have to combine everything. So I actually have to take 4 to the third and x to the third, so I get 64x to the third. And I have to multiply 4x squared, which is how I got 16x squared. But I also need to multiply the 3, the 4 squared, and the 5. So that's how I multiplied all 3 of those to get 240. Then here I do the 3 times the 4x times the 5 squared. So I get 3 times 25 times 4x, 300. and then 1 times 5 to the third, 125. All right, so that would be our final answer for letter D. Okay, so last one. Here's just another way you can organize it. So if that way looks kind of confusing, because I know it kind of looks like everything's really jumbled up. So here's just another way. You could write the coefficients up here, and then my first term is 2x. So I'm going to take that first term here, and I'm going to go 2x to the fourth, and then 2x to the third, 2x to the second, 2x to the first, and then I know it would just be to the 0 there, so it would just be 1. And then in green here, I can then take -2. So again, I start backwards, and I say -2 to the fourth, -2 cubed, -2 squared, -2 to the first, and then there would be nothing there. So I can just put an x there if that makes it easier for you. And then what I need to do, these are the 3 that are going to be multiplied together. So if I put the lead coefficients there, so I'll use pink to do that. So I have 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. Okay, then I'll put my blue terms in. So 2x to the fourth, that's going to be, let's see, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So I can put in 16 x to the fourth. And then here, that's going to be 8x to the third. And then here, that's going to be 4x squared. And then that'll just be 2x. And then that was nothing. Maybe an x was a bad idea there, so maybe we'll just color it in so we know that that's nothing. Okay, so now in green, I'm going to put these in so I know this is nothing. Now here I just have a -2, so I'll just put in a -2 here. And then here I will have a 4, so I'll put in a 4 there. And then here I will have a -8. And then here I will put in a -16. Actually, that'll be a positive 16, right? Okay, so now I need to multiply each of these terms together. So I really didn't leave much room here, but I'm going to go ahead and multiply them together. So now I have 16x to the fourth. And if I multiply this, I have 4 times 8, which is going to be 32, times -2. So I have -64x to the third. That's where the minus sign comes from. Then here, 6 times 4 is going to be 24 times 4, so that's going to be 96, so positive 96x squared. Then I have 4 times 2 is going to be 8 times -8, so -64x. And then here I just have a plus 16. Okay, so that's going to be my final answer. So the only other way to do that would be to write that out 4 times and then multiply it together, which you can do if you're more comfortable doing that. That's fine. This is just a shortcut to, instead of having to continue doing all that distribution property. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense to you. If not, we'll talk about it more in class tomorrow, and hopefully that will clear it up. All right, thank you so much.